All right, S-Cube people. This lesson is going to be one of a few that are based on rational number operations. What? All right. Those are fancy words for basically saying we're going to be going over all the different types of ways that you can add or subtract or multiply or divide positive and negative. That's the key, negative numbers. We're going to go through today adding negative numbers, also known as integers. Integer, fancy word for positive and negative whole numbers. So we're going to go over that today, and then we'll do subtracting, and then multiplying and dividing, and then we'll move into adding and subtracting fractions that are negative and decimals. It's going to be great. But this one is adding. So first things first. I'm going to go through three different rules or scenarios for how to add negative numbers, how to add integers. I really hope that this is the lesson that you really latch on to because I teach subtracting integers by using or adding integer rules. So if you can learn these ones and learn them well, you'll be very successful at subtraction, and subtraction will feel a whole lot easier. So scenario one, the easiest of them all, is when you have two positive integers, two positive whole numbers. We don't even need to spend time on this because you've known this since you were little. When you add positive numbers and only positive numbers, you simply add the numbers together and your answer is positive. So for example, let's say we had 4 plus 5. Well, 4 plus 5 is positive 9. Done. I'm not going to go over tips or tricks for this because we should know how to add regular old whole numbers. But our next scenario is what happens if you're adding 2 or 3 or whatever numbers and they're negative, if they are negative. So the way that I will go through this is you're going to take the two numbers, add them together, and your final answer should be negative. So let's visualize what that looks like. I'm going to go over a couple different things. Hopefully at least one of these ways will help your mind to start to grasp negative numbers a bit better. So negative 4 plus negative 2 is the problem we're looking at. First off, one way to look at this is if you're a rule follower or memorizer, just memorize the rule. Add the numbers, your answer is negative. So 4 plus 2 is 6, and because they're negative, my answer is going to be negative. But I like to think of ways that my mind can grasp things better. So one way you can do this is you could literally visualize it with integer chips, these little red chips here that have negative signs on them. So think about it. If you've got 4 of something that are called negative, and then 2 more of something that are called negative, then in total you've got 6 negative things altogether. So if I'm combining them, that's in total 6 negative red integer chips. But the real way that I like to think about this is I think of it as money, just because I don't know, we all use money. We kind of can all understand money. If you have a negative number, I like to think of that as debt. Debt, you owe someone something. So let's say I've got $4 of debt, that's represented by the negative 4, and $2 of debt. In total, I've got $6 of debt. So you can think of these as like values of money. And that might help you in adding things together. Lastly, you could even use a number line if you wanted to, right? If you were at negative 4, and then you're going to go 2 more spaces negative. So you're at negative 4, and you're going 2 more negative. That'd be 2 to the left. That would get you to negative 6. I think the money scenario helps me the best, but find something that works for you. Because the real struggle, the real work is what happens when you're adding numbers and you have different signs. Let's look at this here. The rule states, and I'm going to break this down, the rule states that you need to subtract the absolute value of the integers. What does that mean? So let's look at an example, and then we'll go to the second part of the rule. The example I'm going to be working with is 5 plus negative 10. So when you are adding and you have numbers with different signs, for a second, you're going to pretend that both of the numbers are positive because the absolute value of 5 is positive 5, and the absolute value of negative 10 is positive 10. So the first thing says subtract the absolute values. So first I found the absolute value. Absolute value is just a fancy way of saying how far is a number from 0. Negative 10 is 10 spaces away. 5 is 5 spaces away. So I have their absolute values written down, and it says to subtract them. So what is 10 minus 5? It's 5. So then my last step, let's read the second half of the rule. The second half of the rule says, in your final answer, keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. So what's bigger, 10 or 5? 10 is bigger. And in the original problem, 10 was negative, and I'm going to keep the sign in my answer. Since that was negative, my final answer is going to be negative. So 5 plus negative 10 is negative 5. Now, you might not like this rule. The words might be complicated, or it might just not sit well with you. So let's think of some other ways to visualize this. One way is with integer chips again. And I don't know if you might have had little army men, or maybe still have them in your house. When I was a kid, my brother and I had these like little plastic army men dudes, and he had the green army men, and I had a pack of they were like tannish color, and we would line them up facing each other, and we would pretend that they would fight, and then whoever had more people in their line would win, because all the guys would knock each other over. So that's kind of how I think about adding integers. You've got this line, so I've got positive 5. So let's make my line of positives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it says you're adding negative 10. So I'm going to make my line of negatives. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's kind of like the army men thing. I know it's a little silly to think of it like that, but this positive and this negative, they zero out. Positive 1, negative 1, 0 out. Positive 1, negative 1, 0 out, 0 out, 0 out. So these 5 pairs, they zeroed out. They amount to nothing. 1 plus negative 1, 0. 1 plus negative 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. And then what's left over in the addition problem is these 5 army men, these 5 red negative integer chips. So when you put together positive 5 and negative 10, the leftover is negative 5. So maybe that'll help you in terms of visualizing these problems in your head. The last thing you could think of is what I talked about on the previous slide, which is money. You could say, all right, I have $5 in my pocket, and then I owe someone $10. So I can only pay them $5. That's all I have. And what am I left over with? I'm in debt, negative $5. So maybe that'll help you. I don't know. But start to think of some way that you can visualize this in your head, so that when you're working with negative numbers, it can start to feel a little bit more like second nature, and you can develop the skill a little bit more. I think we should do one more example. So let's do one more, and then we'll call it quits. Second example, negative 3 plus 7. So I'm going to first use the rule. The rule said, find the absolute value of each. So that'd be 3 and 7, and subtract that. So 7 minus 3 is 4. And then the final answer is positive or negative. Well, it's going to be positive. Why? Because the 7 is bigger than the 3, and in the original problem, the 7 was a positive number. So my final answer is going to be positive 4. So negative 3 plus 7 is positive 4. You could also think about it as money. I'm in debt, $3. Oh, and then I find $7 in my pocket. Well, I can pay back my $3 of debt, and I'll have $4 left over, positive 4. You could also think of it as the integer chips, right? You could say, all right, I'm lining up 3 negative chips, 1, 2, 3, and then 7 positive chips. And then like the army men, they can do battle. You've got a a zero pair, a zero pair, a zero pair. So all of those cancel out. And what's left over? Positive 4. Either way, today's work is based on adding integers, so use those rules, use this video. Please feel free to reach out and ask us questions if you have any. And as you do your work, get a clean sheet of paper, do the work, write the original problem, circle your final answers, and then take a picture and submit it so that we can review how you're doing and send you some feedback if you need any. Other than that, good luck. Enjoy the rest of your day. Otherwise, happy doing some math.